Hey there, I'm Tracy Spears, speaker, author, coach, and founder of the Exceptional Leaders Lab and head cheerleader for anyone wanting to play bigger. This week, I'm super excited to introduce you to one of my favorite people, Kara Mohr. Kara Mohr, PhD, is a performance coach and internationally recognized dynamic keynote speaker who is known for her expertise and experience in the areas of behavior change, exercise, and motivation. For more than 25 years, Kara has been using her warm and engaging style to inspire teams and individuals to transform their understanding of personal energy and purpose. Her mission is to be a present and authentic person who creates positive and meaningful connections with others. And I can tell you, she's nailing that. Her goal is to inspire others to become fully alive in their lives using mindset, fitness, and nutritional strategies as fuel to engage their best selves. Kara began her career in academics and has held faculty positions at the University of Louisville, the University of Pittsburgh, and Eastern Michigan University. At the University of Pittsburgh, she was also the assistant director of the Physical Activity and Weight Management Research Center, an NIH-funded research center that focuses on the role of exercise in the prevention and treatment of overweight and obesity. Kara earned a BS in psychology from Pennsylvania State University and her MS and PhD in exercise physiology from the University of Pittsburgh. She now lives in Louisville, Kentucky. In her free time, you can find Kara cooking with her husband and having kitchen dance parties with her 2 daughters, which I can totally see. Her specialties: health and wellness, behavior change and habits, emotional and mental well-being, purpose, self-discovery, all things that this audience needs to know a little bit more about. So Kara, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited. Listen, I'm so excited to have you here. I have had a front row seat to watch you speak many, many times, and I still take notes when I watch you. I still walk out of every kind of session thinking, all right, I can do better. So thank you for that. But let's tell the audience, before we dig into all of that, a little bit about your background, where you grew up, kind of catch us up to date.
Yeah. So I grew up in two cities, really, Pittsburgh, and then we moved there when I was in my really formative stages to Plano, Texas. And so I spent the better part of my adolescent years in Plano, and then right before I was finishing up high school, we moved back to Pittsburgh. And so I stayed in Pittsburgh, where my family is now, for many, many years, going on to do my undergraduate and my master's and my PhD in that area. So that's where I grew up. My background is one of, I feel like lots of iterations of Kara. So, I've done a lot of different things, but always under the same vein of well-being, health, wellness, trying to live fully alive with some vitality and some fun and some play.
Nice. When I first met you, you're not going to remember this, but I'll never forget it. And I've told everybody that when I'm talking about you, I go, one of the first things out of the gate, you said, my husband and I are trying to lunge a mile. Do you remember that? And I still don't know.
I do remember the phase of our life where we were trying to do that. Yeah, it was radical and ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just a lunge across the room. Like I don't know. I can't even sit on the toilet after doing just, a few lunges. So just for the audience, that's what kind of shape Kara and her husband are in. I'm just kind of giving you a visual if you're just listening and not watching over on the YouTube channel.
Also, for the audience, don't try that at home. We never actually accomplished that goal. And recently, we tried to lunge around the track at the gym that we work out at, which is, like maybe a quarter of a mile. And I was sore for probably close to a week. So it's certainly not a goal I think anyone should aspire to.
That makes me feel better that you still get sore doing exercise. Or always, as a kid, how does this happen? I mean, this isn't just, I'm into this. Like, this is who you are to the core. How did that start?
Well, I mean, my mom, can take all the credit for it. Actually, my family can take all the credit for it. So my name is Kara Ann, and that is my whole first name, but I've always gone by Kara. And so my nickname as a child was Fatty Annie.
Oh,
yeah, I know, traumatizing, right? It's obviously worked out for me in the long run, but my mom and my brother and sister, and that's always what they would call me. And so I really internalized this idea that I was overweight, and I was chubby as a kid because what child does not have some, baby fat and so forth. And they thought it was really a term of endearment, but ultimately it was an identity I thought that I had that I needed to grow out of. And so in high school, I just had the motivation to do something about that and started exercising and paying attention to what I was eating. And then one of the things I found about that experience is that I really loved the way it made me feel, that I had this sense of control in my life that was, something that I could set a goal and go after. It wasn't necessarily, very restrictive or anything like that, but it was just learning what I was capable of doing and liking the way my body and my energy was responding in terms of that. And so I think that really brought me out of my shell. It brought me into the state of who I want to be and always gave me an avenue for handling stress and so forth. And so it just blossomed from there.
Looking back on those pictures of you as a kid, I didn't know this story. What do you see now when you look back at her?
I see every kid, right? I was not somebody that I would call Fatty Annie. I was a kid who had some belly fat or some baby fat and just liked to play and run around and read books. So reading was my passion. I was never into sports. It was my activity of choice. And what's interesting is I think that, a lot of our culture says that we have to look or be a certain way. And for a long time, I believed that. I mean, for a long time, that was, if this is the way I am and the world doesn't want me like this, I need to change. And so I found a way to do that. And even in my early part of my career, when you read my bio, I was working in the area of obesity and weight loss and behavior change. And now, thankfully, I think my idea around well-being, around health, around who we are physically and aesthetically is vastly different. It very much is not about that. It's about understanding that you can use energy to apply that in any area of your life. So you can, you know, invest in your career, you can invest in your relationships. And really, what you want to have is enough energy and vitality and health to do all the things that we can possibly do in life. So,
Right. I love that you always give a lot of strategies, and I wanna make sure that the audience hears all of those strategies, so stay tuned. I'm gonna put a pin in that and come back to it, because I have learned a lot from you about some of those, how to rethink some of the routines that you're in and some of those things. So before I do, the name of the podcast is Shift Out Loud, and it's about those moments where you shifted and something, on the other side of that made your life better, or some shifts we've heard did not. So that's a shift. You have this shift as a kid, and I'm not gonna go into how I feel about the nicknames, but I do think they stick in our, as you know, I do a lot on self-limiting beliefs, and it's so interesting that, I'll have these amazing, beautiful women or men, that'll have like this negative self-talk, and like when you push them a bit and you investigate it a bit, it does kind of sometimes end up back in some of those comments that are made from loving parents, let's agree, some not so loving, but, some of those things get, I think, put in your head, and you as a kid, you don't have the gift of discernment to know that it's a loving comment, right? You haven't developed that yet, so it sounds like you have used that for fuel though, in that shift, right? Which I love. So that I'm gonna call that your first shift, but that might not even be true, but take us through maybe the next couple of shifts that as you thought about, where your life shifted, what came to mind?
probably the next major shift for me came from when I finished my PhD. I was in the field of exercise physiology. I was working and doing research within exercise and behavior change and weight loss. And I mean, I had always imagined myself when I entered even my undergraduate degree. I saw myself solely as a college professor. I love to teach. I love to work with, young minds, and this idea of, we can shape the future and we can inspire people to use reading and education to unlock potential. And so I always imagined I would go into academics. So my undergraduate degree was in psychology. And at the end of my college career, I was doing some peer sort of counseling as I was applying to PhD programs in counseling and clinical psychology. And I realized that maybe I didn't have the stuff that was cut out for, that I would carry around all these stories that I heard from people, and it would just felt like too much. Now, in hindsight, I just didn't have the tools to process handling all of that information like I would if I went through that degree. But it was a first learning moment for me. And so I had always been really passionate about exercise and movement, and that's when I shifted and I said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna get my degree in exercise physiology." And so that's what I did. And when I finished my PhD, again, dead set on finding an academic job that I could teach and inspire. And academics, it's an interesting place, the world of academia. Um, so I got my first teaching job and I was at Eastern Michigan University and it was nice, but it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So then I shifted again and went kind of to the university. I went to Brown Medical School and I was doing research at a clinical center there at Miriam Hospital. And we were doing weight loss studies. And then I took the position at the University of Pittsburgh, teaching and doing all these sorts of things. And, there was always something always a little off. Like I'd be looking for my next academic job. So then I took my last and final job at the University of Louisville, where when I started to look around and say, what's next? I was like, oh, it's me. The constant here is Kara in academics. Because before I didn't see that. I just thought there was something about the job or
Yeah.
this faculty or this element. And so to make the shift out of academia altogether and to start my own career and my own business with my husband as entrepreneurs was a massive undertaking for me. I mean, I think it changed everything. And what drove that is the fact that, I went into academics to teach and to inspire and to be a part of something that felt bigger and that was really, had the possibility to change minds and change the world. And it's a lot of politics and it was a lot of, just keeping things in motion. And they didn't want me with students. They wanted me writing grants and bringing in funds. And so it just wasn't a great fit for me. But what I was able to do was figure that out within my business, how I could, again, take everything I knew about well-being and health and make that something that was actionable and accessible to people who were really interested in learning that information.
Interesting. So when you make that decision, and I think that is something interesting to point out. You are looking at it being the circumstances and the environment and okay, so but that moment when you're like, oh shit, this is about me. I don't think I'm happy doing the thing that I'm doing. A lot of people get to that point and don't make the shift. They just stay in that and keep either moving around or they feel like, "I have all this education invested. I had all of this energy, and I don't wanna shift." What do you have any advice for them if somebody's feeling that way right now?
Yeah, I think for me, and I can only speak to my experience, but for me, the difference was that I was becoming a person I didn't recognize. I would come home and I would spend probably more time complaining about my job than I was actually working in my job. And so when all of my energy and all of my free time was spent complaining about what was happening or what I didn't like or what wasn't working and how I didn't have a sense of purpose or drive or meaning, that was when I was like, well, this is your one and only life. If you don't do this now, you know, then when are you ever going to possibly do it? So that was the driving factor. I think the thing for anyone making that decision is to really look at, can you see yourself feeling this way in the rest of your life or
Mm,
for another 5 years or another 10 years? And if you can't, if you don't like the version of you that has to exist within that institution and system, then that's clear evidence to leave.
mm, that hits deeply in a lot of ways for me. So, in that space, when you're gonna make that transition out of that, I mean, as scary as that is, did you know pretty quickly what you were gonna go do? Did you have that worked out first, or did you make the decision and then scramble? How did that go? Did you have a side hustle first that you transitioned to?
I did. And so my husband, when he finished his PhD, he also has a PhD in exercise physiology. He never wanted to go into academics. He was like, it's limiting. There's not a lot of options. Never, people don't seem truly happy and a lot of the institutions he had been in. So he had gone to just create his own business where he was consulting and writing and speaking and working. So I knew that that was possible because he was showing me alongside me that's a way to do it. But as part of that, one of the things I had been doing for the last couple of months before I left academics was teaching for a continuing medical education company. So they were doing well-being and continuing medical education for doctors and nurses and pharmacists. And so it was teaching, but it was clean and easy. You walked in, you did the 8-hour job, you gave the talk. and then you left. And so I really enjoyed that. And what I realized about that is that I love the speaking. I love the interacting with people, the questions, and trying to figure out the best way to tell a story that an audience could connect to it. And so that really inspired me that, speaking as an option or creating content that people can connect with and make change within their life was something that really I was pretty fired up about and that pretty passionate about.
Nice. So does Chris like say, yes, do it. Come do this with me. Or does he say, oh my gosh, you're the only one with a for sure paycheck right now. So how does that go? How's that conversation go?
I think Chris was so tired of listening to me talk about academics and the people I was working with and things I was doing that he was like, anything's better.
Nice. Nice.
We could live in a van and it would be better than that, kitchen conversation that takes place day after day after day. So
That's so interesting. I just left a client's an hour ago and came over here and I was with the team. And the team, what we were talking about was the ecosystem that they're all part of. And there was this conversation about leadership not caring or leadership, whatever. And I was like, whose leadership? Like, is that true? And I was really trying to give them a counter to that story. A lot of people go to their jobs and they have this story that leadership doesn't care or whatever. But if you're in leadership, not only do you care so deeply that you're trying to keep the doors open or you're trying to make it a better work environment, but sometimes that doesn't translate to the people that work there. And so as I said to the group, that sometimes you make your own weather, right? And so when I hope that when I left there, they feel that way. But there was a part of me as I'm listening to you that is also thinking you also have to have your own agency in that, right? Like you also have to inventory, am I in the right? Am I even in the right atmosphere, I guess, ecosystem? But you have a lot of control over that. But for you, I think this idea that and I've watched you do it, that you probably are on a much bigger stage now, doing even more of the thing that you went into academia to do, right? Like, isn't it interesting that you're influencing so many more people in this format? So you kept what you wanted to do and changed the format, fair to say?
yeah, I think so. And um, absolutely. And I think that the format before was pretty small, right? If you think about a semester classroom, you have maybe 20, 25 students in there in any given, uh, month or year. And then they're only going on to only some of those people will go on to just kind of shape other minds. So now it's fun because I get to speak to much larger audiences. I get to have this platform where people, can re-interact with me and apply that information and then ask for, new information. How do we tweak this and move on? So that's been a lot of fun because it just shows me that sometimes what comes out of our mouths, the things that we are sharing, don't land the way that we think. And so it also reinforms me in the ways that we can help people, you know, apply this and change their lives and make it for the better.
I love that. What's the next shift that happens? So you shift into being an entrepreneur, two families or two people in the family doing that. What happens next?
So then we had our own business. We ran a fitness boot camp for women that we ran successfully for many, many years. So we were on the starting ground of, when people are first doing boot camps, we opened it then. And I remember in that moment, kind of thinking about, I never really saw myself as a business owner. I really thought the academics would be, or speaking or teaching would be my platform. But then it was a very different way of interacting because I was running a business while also doing those things. And so it was maybe the second month of this boot camp. It was at 5:30 in the morning at a park near our house. And we had 78 people show up. And I was,
Wow.
whoa, what is going on right here? So it grew big quickly. And, we had multiple locations and coaches. And so it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, we're onto something. We're tapping into something. And that, we had that business for 8 years before we ultimately ended up selling it. And one of the things that that experience taught me was this idea of the social connection, that there's this element of well-being that comes from our ability to connect with other people. And so, we would have 50 people show up at 5:30 in the morning to work out and see the sunrise. And they would say, like, we're not here for the exercise. We're here for this sense of community and belief in each other and belief in ourselves that transpires and informs everything we do the rest of the day. So they would check that really hard thing off their box first thing in the morning. And then they would go on and feel really confident and proud and inspired the rest of the day. So that was the moment for me that I really understood that the power of what movement and exercise and well-being could do. That if we believe in ourselves, we take time to invest in who we are, that it affects absolutely every aspect of your life for the better.
Mm. So those 78 people show up and you go down the path to that business, but you sell it in 8 years. What led to the sale of the business?
So it was, we had in that 8-year span, we had 2 young children, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, having a nanny come to the house to watch the kids so we could go off and go to work was not a model that was continuing to work. And so we just knew that perhaps something needed, like we had to change. We loved the business, but it was also becoming one of those things that we were caught up in the difficulty of running it, that it just didn't feel as fun and exciting. And this is something that I've learned over the years about myself, that, sometimes I want to make big shifts because I'm done doing a thing, right? And there's something about it that no longer is working for me in my life. And instead of really diving in and saying, how do I make this work and continue to stay with this, I'm much more likely to make a major shift so that I can see a change that's immediate. And every time I've done that, then the subtle shifts have to catch up, right? Like, so you make this major change, like I'm going to change my job, or I'm going to sell this business, or I'm going to do something radically different. And then this feeling will go away. And that feeling does go away. But all the little pieces of yourself that have to catch up to who you are to get you back in alignment with the person you want to be and how you want to live your life, those subtle shifts are hard, right?
Preach.
So we sold that business. Chris went off and he started coaching and teaching and facilitating for corporate clients. And I stayed at home with my 2 young children. And it was probably one of the hardest years of my life because I, was getting to now experience the fact that I sold something that I loved. I believed in this business. I had created so much goodwill in my community and also strong relationships with these women. And then I just sort of walked away from it. And at that time, I was like, what's next? And I was like, I'll just make my children my project.
How'd that go?
That didn't turn out so well, because children aren't projects, they're people.
That's right.
And so when I was trying to drive my life so much in that area, then that's when I was like, oh, this has to change next. The next big thing is that I can't make my children my project. I need to do something of meaning in the world. And so that's when I went more toward corporate speaking and allowed that to sort of be where our business is now. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad that I had that year of staying home and trying to figure out, the saying to myself, oh, this one change will be enough. And then figuring out how to make sure that I was back in alignment. But it's a challenging thing. And I think I'm still always encountering that, right? I make a major change or a major shift in one direction, and then I wonder why I'm still dissatisfied. And I'm like, oh, because all the little pieces need to get there as well.
I don't even know if I could tell you how much I needed to hear that today. So whether there's anybody listening to this podcast or not, that hit me hard because of the recent changes, that I've gone through. And you feel so splintered sometimes when you make a change. And I think to give yourself the grace to let some of those pieces catch up, I think that's really beautifully said. Thank you for that. And in doing that, would you say that you are uncomfortable when things are static, or are you most comfortable when things are static? Are you sitting here saying I'm curious what your view is. Do you like to mix things up, or do you like the idea of no, let's just settle here for a little bit?
I like to mix things up.
I
all the
know
time.
you do. I knew I felt like I knew the answer, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and it's harder. It's harder. My husband and I have our business together. We have 2 children. I always suggest radical things like, let's move to another country and try a business there. And he was always like, what's this about? And there's usually always something underneath it, right? This idea. And I think it's maybe a fear of just being stagnant, a fear of not creating new iterations of myself. And so, when you're you're doing something for a long period of time, you can easily fall into a rut where it's very comfortable. You know what to do. You can do it well. And so I'm always asking myself, am I challenging myself enough? Am I doing something that's taking me out of my comfort zone? And the answer is usually yes and no, right? Like I'm willing to do something radical, like move my entire family to another country where I don't speak the language. But I'm not willing to, make myself vulnerable and ask for, more money with a client, or I'm not willing to ask, for what I need with a client if it's not working in my favor. So,
Oh,
uh, those those are things that I've more recently had to learn and sit with, and you know, we are who we are, I guess.
yes. And when you say that you are good at change and all the things, but not necessarily as good at abdicating for yourself in some of those environments, has there been a shift recently for you that has changed your awareness of that and also how you negotiate that?
Yeah, so I mean, and we've talked about this already in some ways, but I think the place that I find myself in right now is that I can distract myself a lot with busyness. I can distract myself by just doing more work or the next thing or chasing something. And so this past year, one of the things I needed to do because, as I'm raising two young daughters, one's 15 and one's 12 and a half. And as I see them in this phase of their life where they're trying to figure out their identity, they're trying to figure out who they are and what their role is in the world and how did they present themselves and where they want to invest their energy and time. I'm finding myself being, just observing all that and realizing, that maybe I can learn from them, that this process of discovery is a really important one. And too often we do that early in life and we don't ask the right questions enough throughout our lifetime. So for the past year or so, maybe 6 months, I have found that I'm trying to do less. I'm trying to actually be comfortable saying no more frequently to work so that I have more space and time to really make sure that, if I'm itchy for a big jump, that it's for the right reasons, that it's not just because I'm staying stuck or I'm playing small or anything else, but it's really because that's what I need to uncover in my life.
I love that. I had somebody recently remind me that you want to make sure you're running to something and not away from something. Right,
Yeah.
and so I can look back on some of the changes I've made, and I was running away from something, and in those spaces, I think it's even more difficult for change because you have let go of something, and you're in the middle of something, and you're not sure where you're going, but if you're running to something, at least you can keep looking forward, right? You don't stop and look around and keep looking backwards, right? It keeps you forward facing, so that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, I love that. I love the thinking about that, especially in light of my life, right? And the idea of chasing the next thing or running thing.
So, Kara, as you are, thinking about the audience experience, what do you hope that audiences, not just this podcast audience, obviously, but when you stand up in front of 1,000 people, what's the message you really want to get through to them?
Yeah. I think the message that I would love everyone to walk away from is this idea of personal choice that, when they think about health and well-being and how they're defining their life, that it's going to look different for every single person. And we've been given a lot of messages that it's a one size fits all, that everyone should want this when it comes to their physical appearance or their physical well-being. Everyone should need to aspire to this. And it can look a lot of different ways, and our life changes across the season. So, what we need in any given day and time is going to be different. And giving ourselves permission to just ask for what that is and create a life that, matches that
Mhm.
versus saying, oh, if, physical health is important, I'm going to make sure I go to the gym 5 days a week. And even though I don't have much time in my schedule and I really don't enjoy the gym, I'm still going to force myself to do that.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
emotional intelligence is really important. Great. I'm going to have deep, meaningful conversations with everyone, even though I can't stand people. Like we tend to just take these things in and hold ourselves to these standards that aren't even ours and that don't make sense for what we desire and who we want to be.
Do you think it's because we're not connected to the outcome enough? I always think about that workout feels like a punishment, and yet the way you're describing it and the way I've I understand it to be is it is a means to an end. And most people don't think about the end, right? They think about it's going to take my time. I'm not, I don't enjoy doing it, but they forget about the physiological changes, the psychological changes. That's what's on the other side. And I watch somebody like you and think, what the good parts of being super active and all the things, you're living that. But a lot of us, I'm gonna put me in the exact opposite, like, "Oh, I don't wanna take the time to do that." And then when I do that, I know it's because I have forgotten or I'm disconnected from the value of it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And, if we could put in pill form the feeling that you get when a workout is over, it would be the most widely prescribed and addictive drug known to man, right? Like all of us would
It
be
isn't
on
there a pill? Isn't there a pill like that?
that's maybe be my next shift, right? Creating that. Yeah, I think, but it doesn't mean that I actually want to do it either. I
Right,
just, I always think when I think about the choices that I'm making for my own health and well being is always in service to my future self. What
nice.
does she need? And am I handicapping her tomorrow? Am I helping or hurting? And when I can do that, I can usually allow myself to find some room for what is possible. I always tell people to think about, this idea of create a non-negotiable around these elements of wellness that you need, whether that's a certain amount of sleep or whether it's movement or if it's time with others and social connection. Really think about that. And then even when your schedule is slammed, even when times are really tight and you really don't have much room in your schedule, what is the barest, like smallest thing that you can give yourself? So when I allow myself to do that and say, okay, well, if movement is important to me and that walking the dog is going to be enough, then I feel really proud that I walked the dog and made that happen versus saying, oh, I should have done X, Y, and Z. And now I'm, failing at this too, even though,
Yeah,
I'm not failing at anything.
that's right. When I've watched you, like, give people some strategies and, how to move about the world in a better way and all the things. I'm curious, what's the feedback that you get from your audiences and I watch them walk up to you afterwards. What are the few things that you could offer us that they say, "That was something that I needed to hear," or, "That's something that I'm gonna start doing." What are some of those things that come to mind?
I think that just the permission piece, the permission to own this for yourself. I think I found that a lot of women really want that. They want the ability to say, yes, like it can look a different way, or I can take the time for this, and I'm worth, investing in. Because I think a lot of times people just put themselves last and they take care of everything else, and then wonder why they're really unhappy. So that would be a big thing. What's interesting is what I'm hearing more and more from people is in the talks and the programs that I'm doing, people are burnt out. Everyone's exhausted. The way that we're operating, the way that we're working and living is just, we have made the assumption that more is more. And I know more is my last name. And I would really love that tagline existed in the world, but I don't think it's good for any of us because, just working longer, working harder, trying to get more things is making us exhausted and burnt out. And the real concern here is, are we creating a world that humans can be sustainable, that we have a sense of sustainability and the way that we're showing up each and every day and the energy that we have to give to the things and people that matter most.
Mm. You and I watch audiences come to this realization that they actually have so much more agency than they're utilizing, right? So as you're describing the burnout and all of that, I know my mission on those stages, as is yours, is to say, and who created that? And who is expecting that? And what are you putting on yourself compared to what are you, required to do? Because especially the women that you and I have, interacted with in those meetings has been more I think the eye-opening thing that I always hear them say is, wait a minute, I actually do have a choice in this. And I always think about for the audience, just very quickly, Kara and I are on the faculty for the Signature Leaders organization. So Carol Seymour invited us both, and that's how we know each other. And so I get to follow Kara, like she does her session, and I get to do mine after. And so it's so great to follow you because you give them some tangible strategies. One of them that I think I see people take away is put your car in your phone in the trunk when you get in the car. Like that's kind of interesting. Some of those little, hacks that you're trying to create some separation. Do you do that, or did you do that, or is that just a strategy that you recommend?
No, I do it regularly. I actually am always trying to disrupt the learned patterns that I have that aren't serving me. And I think that it's just, we're creatures of habit. And so if we always have our phone around, then we're going to pick it up more frequently. And when there's a pause, we're going to be much more likely to look at it. I was at an appointment earlier and the person that was there picked up their phone.
Oh,
And I had no desire to look at my phone, but then I picked up my phone and I was like, what am I noticed in that moment, what am I doing right now? And it was just because I was modeling what was happening around me. And I think so often, we those things become unconscious. So many of our habits are just the things we choose day in and day out. And we have to create a hard disruptor to that unconscious habit if we want to change it. And, so I do actually put my phone in the car. I will often lock my computer away in a cabinet and then forget where I put the key the next morning. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be a great spot. And then my kids will call me and I'm like, where was it? I don't know. So
I like the idea of that. It's so simple, right? It's not easy, but it is simple. Like everybody listening knows the 10 things they need to go start doing, but yet doing them or starting doing them. You gave a stat that makes me mad. You said that it takes 66 days to change a habit, and I thought it was 21 days.
at least
Yeah.
66.
Is that what it is?
Flex. Yeah. So I think, we all want that quick fix. It's like my desire to change jobs, right? Do something radically different and it'll solve all the things. And so we want to know, if I just do this for 21 days, is that enough? If I practice it this much, when do I don't have to worry about it? And when it comes to our behaviors, we always have to be thinking about those. And so a better approach is to create a system that supports that. And when you have those elements in place, you don't have to think about it as much because you move from one thing to the next thing and it makes it possible and accessible. But often we think that it's going to be something, magical about a certain time frame and so forth. I think the tricky thing, and you kind of talked about this, we know a lot. I mean, I get in front of audiences and they, sometimes 80% of the people in that room know everything I'm about to say. And that's a hard sell, right? When people always want new information, the new hack, the new tip. And I think anymore that what we really have to understand is that knowing is not enough, that we really have to embody the practice of making the change and putting it into our life and understanding what does that do for us and what things benefit and what things, need to disappear um, by practicing these things over and over again. And that's harder because many of us just don't have the time or space to do it.
Yeah. I'm trying to write a book right now. And first few books was I wrote with Wally Schmader, and I had that accountability partner. And now that I don't have that on my own, I can talk myself out of writing. I have so many other things that I could go do. I really need to do whatever. And Annie Lamont always talks about, you just have to do it every day. Like, and it's a discipline. It's the art of just doing it and not judging it. And I feel like it's the same if you're trying to, start a new healthy habit. You have to behave your way into it. Fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to you have to see yourself as the person who does that versus waiting to become a person because you did these things over and
Oh,
over again,
nice.
right? To see yourself there first.
Nice. Any other shifts that come to mind that we could talk a bit about before we go?
Um, I don't think so. I'm trying to think if there's, I'm still grappling with all the small subtle things, the constant realignment toward finding my center and making sure that the things I have in my life, the people I have in my life, and the activities I'm doing are truly aligned to who I want to be. And, I think it's really, really hard. We have a lot of noise all the time surrounding us, whether that's just technology or news or media or work or, stories that we hold, self limiting beliefs. And so, gosh, that's the real work.
So how do you inventory that? So if you just gave 3 amazing categories. Are these the people I want in my life? Are these the activities I want? Right? How do you inventory that? Is that a practice that you consciously sit down and evaluate it, or is it yeah, what's your practice for that?
I wish I had a really, clean one, right? Like, the 3 steps to
Yeah.
knowing what you want. Um, but I find that it's all about journaling my feelings and really making sure that if I start to feel a certain way or start to act a certain way over and over again, that's information I haven't been picking up on, and really just honoring that, Uh as I've gotten older and wiser, I think it's easier to say, "Not these people." It's a lot easier for me to always say, "Not this," than to identify what it is that I want,
Mm.
right? I tell you when it's not when I have something that I don't want. Uh, but I'm working toward finding ways to pick up earlier on the things that I really do desire, or what I think might bring happiness and better fulfillment and purpose.
I have a friend who her practice is after she spends time with somebody, she spends just a few minutes saying, "How do I feel after that exchange?" And really getting connected to that. And I said, "Ooh," I said, "I people would quit hanging out with me." Like I've like had some of those
That is
moments.
not
And
true.
she's like, "No, no, no, over time, but like if you inventory how you feel with some regularity in like whether it's the people you spend time with or the activities that you're doing or how you feel the next day, all those things. If you I love that you're saying journaling, because I think that's a really good way to get some evidence of that. It's also good, therapy. I love therapy. So, going to therapist, all those things. But for people that are not taking the time to do that, that's where burnout lives, isn't it?
It is because I think, we just assume that it's just temporary. I'm just going to do this for this amount of time and then things will get better. And I often think that, you know, it's what we permit and allow that really wears us down. And so when we're so exhausted that we really can't discern what is good and bad in our lives, then we just are much more permissive about what we'll do, what we'll tolerate. And because there's no energy left, there's no capacity to really say, "Oh my gosh, it's not this," which is why I told you that in the last 6 months, I've been really trying to create space for that. And to create space for that is really hard because we also have the stories around us that, well, if you're not hustling for your business, then you're going to fall behind or you're not going to become relevant or you're not going to have enough work. And there's all these old stories that exist around that can make it very hard. And I think maybe as a, culture, capitalism, whatever it is, wants us to be really busy. They want us to continue to, push things moving forward. And so, you know, that idea of burnout, but once you've experienced it, and I think that that's probably was part of my driver is in the past year that I just was losing my enthusiasm for things. I didn't have the energy. I couldn't come up with clear thoughts about anything that would have really in the past been something I would have been super excited about and really ready to take on. And so when you have that feeling, you have to listen to it. You
That's
have to
right.
pay attention.
That's right. I remember when you kind of started that and said that I don't think you would call it firing a client. I would, but like, that you were changing your client base and you were really making sure that you had the right clients. And I love the thought of that for you. I also do the same thing. And I don't know. Do you have any mantras that you live by?
Well, I would say that one mantra that in this last year I've been saying less is more, that this idea of when you have less, you can really allow yourself to see, exactly what's in front of you. Because I think so often, we're so busy in the pursuit of more things that we don't take stock of what we have in front of us. And it might be more than enough, right? Because we can have gratitude and we can be grateful for what is and we can celebrate all of that, but that requires some time and space to take in, and so, um, I that's still been my mantra,
Like it.
because it keeps me from wanting to, pursue more and just chase again, but that's probably the only one.
I like it. It's a good one. It's a good one. What's the next shift for you? Are you moving to another country? What are you doing?
Maybe, no. No plans as of yet to move to another country. I will let you know, you'll be the first, but I think right now, Chris and I have had multiple ideas for some books that we wanted to write, and then one keeps on coming to the surface. This idea of really helping people see ways that they can create a system for themselves around prioritizing their own health and well-being amidst all this noise, amidst all the confusion that's out there, and finding a way that they can make it individual, because it's not one size fits all. There's a lot of times that I would go back and look at the earlier part of my career and the things that I said and the things that I encourage people to do. And I'd be like, not now, don't do that. And don't listen to that anymore. So, and
Ooh,
part of
what's on that list? What would be
what's
one
on
of the
that
things?
list? I mean, I think just, I was in a world where really we really encouraged people that one of the main outcomes or reasons to exercise and take good care of yourself was to lose weight and to prioritize your health. And I now think health can look a lot of different ways. And weight's one piece of that, but it's not the overall arching piece. Um, and so, really giving people the understanding that we only have so much energy in our day and in capacity. And so you really have to be strategic about how you're applying that. And you don't need to take in all these things that society and the world is telling you to do, because if you are trying to use that energy for all of those things, you're going to end up feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and not get the benefit from it, because you're not applying it in the right way for you.
Mm. Isn't that true? Well, listen, I want can you tell the audience how they can connect with you, how they can get more information about what you do, your organization? Yeah, let's give a pitch.
Okay. So they can find us at mohrresults.com, and Mohr is spelled Mohr. I joke that that's the reason I married my husband, for branding purposes. Good. So mohrresults.com. Of course, you can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those sites as well. And, I think that's it.
All right. We'll put it in the show notes as well. Listen, I just thank you so much for not just today, but for you've been a really, really good friend to me. And I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. You've been like, I'll get a random text from you or something, and every time I get it, it makes me stop for a moment and be super grateful that you are in my life. So I appreciate you, and thank you for all you're doing to make the world a better place.
Oh, well, ditto. Thank you. I adore you. And so I really appreciate all the wisdom I've gained from you and all the things that you put out in the world, because you make the world a better place as well. And so I'm glad you're in it, and I'm glad I get to exist in it with you.
Thank you.